Welcome to the Donnie B Show on the Let's MAGA Locally platform. Today we have a special guest. Some people know him as TC, but his real name is Thomas. So TC, or Thomas Ross, he's running for a House of Representatives seat, District 161. Thomas, welcome to the show. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Awesome.
Yeah, my name's Thomas Ross, as you said. Many people knew me as TC growing up in the Joplin area. That's where I was born and raised. My wife, Suzanne, is a doctor here and works at Freeman in Joplin. And we have a wonderful daughter who's turning 2 this month. She likes to keep us on our toes.
Oh, I bet. I remember when I had a 2-year-old. I have 2 boys, and that 2 years old, I mean, you're not getting a lot of sleep, and they're into everything.
And time flies, let me tell you.
I know. It seems like yesterday, and I got one that's 17 now, and I got one that's 13. So, cherish those times at that age because it goes by so fast.
Well, we're going to try to.
Yeah. I'd like to talk about a few things today. Of course, you're running for a leadership position in our state. So as we go to vote in August, there's some variables that we like to look at. So I always like to bring up decision making. For me, I want to understand what makes a person tick. When something comes across their desk, how do they make those decisions? Do you use like weighted variables? Do you look to see if it's following the Constitution? Do you look to see if it increases government or decreases the size of government? Does it cost the taxpayers more or less? Or does it make the country more free or less free? So could you just explain to our audience kind of some variables or criteria on your values and how you make decisions?
Sure thing. As a Christian through and through, morality is of the highest importance whenever it comes to bills that come across the desk. And then you have to sit there and make sure that you don't violate or contradict the Constitution in any way, shape, or form. There are many representatives, ones that are currently in office and such, that they tread on that fine line that kind of can cause some issues in the long run. It can cause... Is that the sirens for us?
We're having a tornado warning. So, hey, our listeners are going to get to listen to the tornado. The tornado warning.
Solid.
Go ahead and continue.
Anyway, so I'm a firm believer in protecting our Constitution first and foremost above all. We cannot navigate the waters carefully enough. We have representatives who present bills that can cause some issues whenever we approach the Second Amendment. They say that it doesn't violate it, but we're putting more restrictions on it, and ultimately the Constitution says shall not be infringed. So I believe that is a hard line we have to not just draw in the sand, but build a wall around. And that is such a way that we have to also navigate those waters with morality, because people are causing issues in the streets, and we want to try to help, such as the homeless population. We want to try to help everybody to the greatest extent that you can. However, you can't put the livelihood and, possibility of everybody else's future at risk.
Absolutely. I like you. I grew up in a Christian home. I'm a Christian. I'm a believer. And I was always taught, treat others like you want to be treated. And I always use that as kind of one of my guiding, variables in how I treat people. And I know when you get into positions of power, especially at the state level, like you're going to be, you have these special interest groups. And sometimes those special interest groups, they come in, they're smiling, they're nice, they shake your hand, say, hey, I'd love to support your efforts. And they start providing you campaign money. And then after a while they say, hey, I want you to look at this. And they're very sneaky in the way that they get your attention. And then a lot of people, if they want to advance through that career, they think they need these special interests. And then, so therefore the special interests aren't always in line with just the common person in your district. So what's your thoughts on that? And because I think a lot of the people you're seeing, the way they're voting on Super Tuesday, they're tired of the good old boy system. They're tired of the special interests, and they're just wanting good people to go to represent them and then be true to who they said they were going to be when they first started. So, what's your thoughts on that?
I I believe that lobbyists have their places and these special interest groups have their places. However, we need to not change who we are at the end of the day. We have, again, several politicians in place, current representatives of our local districts, that if you want to follow their MEC reports, look at the money coming in and then look at the bills that they push. I mean, we have
Right.
some that get big money from liberal cities such as St. Louis, Kansas City, and Jeff City, and those are the interests that they're pushing, not the interests of the constituents in which elected them to the position. And that is something that really hits hard and true where I'm at. And that's why I'm making such a push on ours, is because Joplin, I feel, has been neglected for such a long time on the stage. I mean, there are some bills that glaze over and help us. One of the big ones that Lane had ever pushed, my compet my competition in this, he seems to have pushed for public safety above all. And I believe that is wholeheartedly one of the truest things we need to focus on. However, if you look around Joplin, you see that there are so many issues with the public safety that aren't being addressed. There are laws in place that our police force have red tape around that we can't enforce locally, and it's having drastic effects on safety, health, and everything else. Drive downtown in Joplin, and you have homeless litter everywhere, just needles on the
Yeah.
street, needles in the parks. It's terrifying.
You're absolutely right. So, we have ordinances, we've had laws on the books since the 1890s, right? It's the political winds that seem to determine whether, we enforce certain laws or certain ordinances, and you're absolutely right. That's what actually got me started on doing this podcast, because I came back after living overseas for the last several years, and I wanted to take my son. I homeschool my children, and I wanted to take him to the park and do a lesson and then play some basketball. I got there. There was people sleeping on the picnic tables in their sleeping bags. Dogs were tied to the post, and it wasn't welcoming. I said, "No, we're not going to do this here." So I got him in the car. I thought, well, let's go to the other park that has a basketball goal, Ewart Park. Got there, 15 to 16. It was worse. 3 or 4 dogs tied up. And that's really what got me thinking, you know what? I need to do better as a citizen of my community, and I got to get involved. We can't just rely on government, because government usually doesn't run anything very well, right? So, like you, and I'm finding that, like Senator Carter, she wasn't part of the establishment. There, the Republican Party. I'm a little. I think we're seeing people turn away from the career politicians, and they want just regular people, business people, farmers, teachers, parents. They want people to step forward and just use common sense in their decision making. So uh, I agree with you on the crime in Joplin. We must do better, right? And I got a question for you about what I'm finding out as I'm starting to research these things. As a bill comes into Jefferson City, it could be a great bill, like initiative petition reform. That's the Republican Party number one priority for the last 5 years, but yet we've been unable to pass that. And what I'm finding out is these special interest groups have pretty much infiltrated a lot of your conservative Republicans or your old guard. And instead of getting that bill passed through, they either sat on it or they poison it with one line that they know nobody's going to agree on. So you, as a representative going in, you're going to have to work with these people. So how do you see that unfolding? Do you see that you can work with them?
So I think at the end of the day, left side, the right side, we're all in this fight together at the end of the day. And everybody has always drawn such a hard line that they will not cross, they will not come to meet and agree on. And that's one of the biggest problems, I think, on the floor of the House that I've seen. I spent a lot of time up there just watching and gathering it all in. And it's divided amongst their own party. It baffles me in the Republican. The Democrats seem to have no issue. At the end of the day, they look at something, they sit there, they look at each other, they all are in agreement, they stick a hard Democrat line on it. Republicans were divided, and I think that all happened whenever, I want to say within the past 10 to 12 years, and when Trump took office, it started to divide the Republican Party amongst what many see as the far right and then the more moderate. At the end of
Right.
the day, we all need to see that we're all Republicans and we all need to be supportive in making this place better. And
Uh,
I think that working with them will be a lot easier when somebody is going to stand their ground and show common sense should rule at the end of the day.
Common sense goes a long way. And you're right. I mean, the thing about politics, it's a give and take, but you can't give away your values and your morals. And I think that's all really the people want when you run on a platform. I'm not going to raise taxes unless it's absolutely necessary for safety, for the goodness of the community. I'm going to adhere to the Constitution. So when you say these things as you're running for your campaign, they're going to hold your feet to the fire. So I think that's really all they want is somebody when they get there to do what they said they were going to do. And I'm disillusioned by our political system because it seems like they get there, then all of a sudden they forget where they came from, and it can be a confusing place. So we're excited to get some new blood. You know, Nick Myers.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So you went to the Jasper County caucus? Were you
Yes,
able
I
to make
did.
it to that? Yeah. How was that? Can you explain a little bit what you saw and kind of the
It,
feeling along that area?
it went pretty smooth. We had a lot of people who wanted to stand up, say their piece. And I mean, ultimately, communication is key. And that is
Right.
something that many people are they're used to getting in their cars, driving to the polls, filling out a box, and stuffing it in and leaving. There needs to be a
Right.
discussion. We need to be more informed before we vote. Many people vote thinking they have the whole truth about something and they don't. Or they'll vote thinking, oh, I like this name over this name, or I don't know either of these, so I'm just going to pick one. You shouldn't put your name or your vote alongside something that you don't entirely understand or you don't entirely support. And
Absolutely. And, you're right on. You're right. Because if you go to the Walmart parking lot and you get approached by somebody and they say, "Hey, will you sign this petition for women's rights?" You need to be very careful because that's not all that petition says. There's probably 37, 39 pages, which I think there's a petition running around right now, and it's basically to push abortion into the Missouri Constitution. But they're bypassing the Constitution using that initiative petition reform. So if they can get enough signatures, then they can bypass it and get that onto make it law in Missouri. So you're
that's
right.
why
You're spot on.
IP reform is so important. I feel we've sat on it for far too long, and we need
Right.
to make sure that we call up our good old representatives and senators and make sure that they push hard. Jill Carter has done a wonderful job. I
Yeah.
can't.
You're right. You're absolutely right. I think she's doing a great job, but she's an outsider. When Trump ran, he was an outsider, and the established party, the old guard, the old Republican Party, they don't like him because he's changing it up. He's not accepting the status quo, the old cronyism, the lobbyists that own everything. So, as we look, I'd like to ask you a question. Now that you're running, you're not part of the good old boy system. You're not part of the old guard. Are you getting any support from the Nick Myers, who's the head of the conservative party in Missouri? Has he reached out to you? Have you talked to him at all about
I've
running?
I've talked to Nick. He himself has not reached out personally. I've approached him at several events, and we've had nice little discussions, but nothing to elaborate or build upon
Yeah.
support
You
for
know,
me running.
I'd like to get a hold of him because I heard rumor that in Newton County, that's Senator Carter, and she's the
Mhm.
sitting senator right now. And I've heard things around town, and I've heard rumor that the old guard was really upset because she came out of nowhere and beat Senator Bill White, right? And he was part of the establishment. And there seems to be like this pecking order. The people may want you, but the party might say, no, this guy's been here longer and we want him to be in there. So they don't really go with what the people want. They go with what their party wants, right? So this is an interesting year because you have Trump running on the national ballot. We've got people that aren't coming up through the system like like Senator Carter did. So it's really interesting. What's your thoughts? Who do you think ultimately rules? Should it be the party or should it be the people?
I mean, this nation was built on the people. to be controlled
Right.
by the people elected to represent the people. The people are the
Yeah.
base of it. The parties have gotten too enveloped in themselves at times, and it makes me frustrated because, as you see on the federal stage, it's gridlock. It's
Right.
two parties that oppose each other to such a heightened extent. And if you aren't in that good old boys club, 9 times out of 10, you aren't going to go anywhere. They can't push
You're right.
things through. And here on the state level, it's visible whenever you see people try to push bills through. You have 7 or 8 bills proposed for the same things. They all get watered down, regardless, usually. However, they'll sit there and they will nitpick who they want to progress through. And it is visible with the IP reform bill that got pushed through. I'm glad one is being pushed through. It's watered down, I believe, personally,
Right.
but
I agree with you.
you see the names attached to it. They're part of the club. So it really just, it's all a game to them, but it's time to shake things up a bit.
You know, you're right. It's all a game. So I was alluding to, from what I'm hearing, is at the caucus in Newton County, Nick Myers, who set the whole thing up, invited the previous senator, which was Bill White, which was his guy, to speak, and he invited Ben Baker, which is his guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you know who wasn't invited to speak but showed up 2 hours early to stack chairs, stood at the doorway and shook hands for 2 hours, and then was the last person to leave? Do you know
I'm
who that
guessing
might have
Jill
been?
Carter,
It was Senator Jill Carter. You know,
amazing woman.
but because she's not part of the old guard, they're trying to isolate her. And I just thought it was a complete disrespect snub from Mr. Nick Myers, who's the head of the Republican Party in Missouri, to not invite her and acknowledge her up on the stage with the others as the sitting senator for our district, for that district. I really thought that was a snub. So I'm telling you, be careful, because if you're not part of the establishment, you got a target on your back.
And that I completely get that. My goal, even though it doesn't really conform to their ideals, is I want to make positive change. So
Right.
I'm not there to make friends, I'm there to make waves. And that's what I'm running on, is trying to fix things for our community. If it helps the whole state, that's awesome. But I'm trying to push forward things that are going to help our community here in Joplin, because we are neglected on the stage.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of why my son and I homeschool, and we wanted to do a project to kind of help our community, and it started out with the homeless and the mentally ill and the drug addicted that are roaming our streets in our community. And so we were thinking of a name, and we decided make America great again locally. So that's why we tagged our website and the program, because people say, oh, that's a Trump thing. No, this is who we are as Americans. We want to make our country great, and it's going to start with you and me and our neighborhood level and our church, uh, in our community, our city. That's where citizens are affected the most, through their state representatives and through their city representatives. Not the national stage. I mean, they do affect us, but nothing like the state and city. So I'm glad we're having good people like you running for positions at our state level. Before we conclude, can you give me an idea of what maybe some of your priorities might be on day one when you get elected?
Day one, we need to focus on fiscal responsibility. We raise taxes far too often, not just as a state, but here locally. And I think one is coming up on the ballot again this year to reinstate for the city of Joplin. We need to table that. I mean, we are under an audit here at Joplin. I worked for the city of Joplin for nearly a decade, and I
Oh,
tried
I
to
didn't know
fix what
that. Oh,
I tried to fix what I could while I could, and I was ultimately limited by the position in which I was at, working in engineering. And so after leaving the city, I just take a look around and see the things that need to be changed. And our local officials, the city council, they have their own problems that they're trying to address. But our local officials, such as the police and fire, they're running into snags and red tape. Even though there's laws on the books, as we've discussed, we've got to cut through that red tape and make it where they're able to do their jobs and not be afraid of the repercussions of violating what people think are, you know, ACLU comes forward and tries to sue people for upholding a law because they think it's prejudice. It's not prejudice, it's protecting.
Well, that's
I,
where the liberals and the Democrats have been very smart. They've changed actually the meaning of certain names and terms, and
mhm.
they've twisted the definitions of them. So, now if you stand up for the same rules and laws, you're now considered an extremist because you want to maintain law and order. Uh, and they're starting that education process even at the school level, the DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, the CRT. You know, it always worked for me. Treat others like you want to be treated. It's not a complex rule; it's a golden rule, and it seemed to work pretty good for people up until the last 5 years, when now DEI is taking over. So you're spot on about
But
that.
yeah, I want to focus on the public safety and public health. I mean, with my wife as a doctor here locally at Freeman, it's kind of hits close to home whenever you look at the DEI implementation across the nation, especially in the communities of doctors you've seen locally. Would you go to a doctor and choose them based on race or based on their ability? Because DEI has opened
Absolutely.
up to a slew of people who are underqualified or they just don't put forth the effort, but because of DEI standards, they're pushed through. And you have people who are far more compatible and capable. I mean, I'm not talking white. I'm talking you have certain diversity groups that are being neglected because they have to cater to other diversity groups. And I don't think
Right.
that that is fair for Americans, the public, or anyone, to be honest.
Yeah, America was founded on being qualified, having the qualified capabilities to do what your profession is calling you to do. I think I agree with you that wholeheartedly. Do you want somebody flying your plane that's not necessarily qualified? Do you want somebody being a doctor? So you're right. We need to look for the best, whether it's a male, whether it's a female, whether they're black, whether they're white, whether they're, my wife is from Iraq. She's a Chaldean Christian, so a lot of people, they'll say, "Oh, you're a hater." Well, how can I be a hater when my wife is from Iraq? So I find it amusing how they try to label you as a hater just because you don't agree with the ideology that they're pushing on you, right?
Yeah, I agree.
So, well, Thomas, is there anything else you would like to tell your audience before we draw this to a close?
Just keep an eye on the wonderful links that are going to be provided. We are going
Okay.
to have several events leading up to the election on August 6th, the primary.
Okay.
August 6th, be sure to get out and vote, please, everybody, and be educated on everything that's on that ballot. On my website, and I know Donnie will probably keep educating everybody as best we can on everything that's going to be on the ballots because we can't we can't be educated enough on this world.
Right. Can you tell us where we can follow you, Facebook or your website? And then we'll post them on the notes below the video. So,
Sure thing. www.thomasrossmo.com is our website. It should on there have links to both our Facebook and Twitter. We started using Twitter as of recently. We kind of avoided the platform for a little while, trying to make sure we focus on the right group here locally. But Joplin is starting to blow up on Twitter, so let's have some fun.
right. Hey, the way I look at it, you got to be on all of them. We're on Podbean. We have magalocally.com, Facebook page, Twitter or X now. So yeah, I think, I think the old legacy media, people are losing faith and trust in the message that they're kicking out. So they're turning to podcast or to YouTube. They just want to know the truth. They just want to, and they want to hear from real people. They don't want to hear from a talking head that's reading off of a screen. Right?
Agreed.
Uh, so, Thomas, I appreciate you joining us today. I will post where everybody can follow you. And I'd like to ask, as the election draws closer, and maybe there's going to be some issues between now and then that's going to arise locally and at the state level. I'd love to have you back on, and maybe we can even focus a little bit on those issues and your perspective on that.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, Thomas, you have a great day, and I appreciate you coming on.
You too. Thank you.